Chuck. Okay, so now we'll take it easy.
Yep.
Max is doing the shadow for us. Pay attention not to go against the... Okay, we are starting this interview essentially for broadcasting it on your website. So actually our audience are all the fans around the world, all the people that know you, all the people that have written your have written your stories, that has read your stories, and so we have to talk to the imaginary entity that they consist in.
Okay, I like to talk to imaginary entities.
Okay, so Robert, you have been already half a century in this field.
Yes, I have.
Exactly. So, how did you get in touch with science fiction, with this way of life that affect all of us that are watching at you?
Well, I started the way I think almost everybody starts. I wrote stories and mailed them to magazines. And then after a while I started to sell them. And that was my introduction to the field.
Was it difficult in the beginning in a way?
Well, I didn't find it too hard. No. I had a lot of stories. I did a lot of writing then. And I would have out 10 or 20 stories at a time. And eventually I sold all of them. Or just about all of them.
Yes, this must have been very encouraging, I suppose, in the beginning. Because a lot of people face, endless series of rejection before they start to be, in a way, recognized by someone.
It was very encouraging. I feel sorry for those going into the field now with very few magazines out there. Of course, it's also true that a lot of people write, but only a few people sell.
Yes. So now there are more people writing than there were used to be at that time, probably.
Yes, so now there'll be more people not selling also.
Yes, because with computer it's also easier to write, actually.
Yes, it is, yes.
Now there are even people that may even not be able to type, but just by telling their story to the computer, they may have it written and then eventually submit it to some news magazine.
Yes, if they learn the codes, they can speak their entire story, and the computer will type it up for them.
Mm-hmm. Back to those years, what do you remember of the period where you were publishing in Galaxy? Yeah.
I remember that I was having a very good time. I lived then in New York's West Village, and I had a small scooter, a Lambretta. I used to bring Horace Gold a story. I would slide it under his door. I would ring the bell first, but Horace frequently didn't answer his door. So I would slide it under the door and go home. He was very fast. The telephone would be ringing when I got back home, and he usually bought what I gave him.
Mm-hmm. And in that period, there were not so many fans and so many attention for science fiction as we have now. So, in a way, how did you feel related to, the mainstream world? The official world of written things.
Well, I never had much of a relationship with science fiction fandom or with any fandom. I was not a fan. I was not a collector of stories. So I stayed outside of all that. There were less fans, but it seemed even then like there were a lot of fans.
You were not a fan, but probably you have read some science fiction before starting to write it and have some kind of icon somewhere there that made you start the light inside at a certain point.
I read science fiction and fantasy from my earliest years. I was always reading it and fascinated by it.
And was there some special writer that left you a big trace from that period? Or even outside the field, of course, of the genre?
Well, there were science fiction authors that I liked. I loved Robert Heinlein, A.E. Van Vogt. There was a fantasy writer named John Collier, who I thought was very good. And there were older stories by Lord Dunsany and others. I read all these.
And apart from the science fiction genre, which other authors were very important for you in that period?
This is so very hard to say. I remember reading a lot of Aldous Huxley, Stephen Crane, James Branch Cable, Hemingway, Faulkner. I read a lot of foreign authors too. I read Dumas and Victor Hugo, Hesse, and Thomas Mann. These were all people who impressed me very strongly and gave me a sense of the 1,000 ways there are of writing a story.
And later on, can you recommend